vagabonds, come all you don't belongs, winners and losers, come people like me. Come all you travelers, tired from the journey, come wait a while, stay a while, welcome you'll be. Come all you questioners, looking for answers and searching for reasons and sense in it all. Come all you fallen and come all you broken, find strength for your body and food for your soul. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. Those who worry about houses and money, and all those who don't have a care in the world. From every station and orientation, the helpless, the hopeless, the young and the old. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. And dreamers and schemers, and come all you restless just searching for home. Movers and shakers and givers and takers, the happy, the sad, the lost and alone. Come self-sufficient with wearied ambition, and come those who feel at the end of the road. Religion haters, accusers, abusers, heard and ignored. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. Come to the feast, there is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace.
Great, good afternoon to you. Nice to see you all here, and welcome to you. And I hope you're enjoying your lunch as always here. And a warm welcome to those of you who are joining us online today, wherever you may be, and whatever your circumstances. Welcome. Glad to have you here. If you're here last week, then you'd appreciate we've started into the month of February. And that means we're kind of spending the month of February thinking about a guy in the Bible called Samson. And the story of Samson is what we're looking at. We'll put them on the screen for you so that you're reminded of him. The story of Samson. Everyone's heard of Samson. And one of the things about Samson is that he was a bit of a lad in a lot of ways. And he he got himself in a fair bit of trouble with some of the kind of riddles. He was a bit of a joker, and one of the riddles has really become quite famous, and it's that we're going to be looking at and thinking about in the passage that I wanted to read from today, from Judges 14, where the riddle runs like this: out of the eater, something to eat; out of the strong, something sweet. And of course, that's what you find on the tin of, I'm probably not allowed to say the maker's name, but golden syrup, because I'd probably get in trouble for advertising or something like that. But the golden syrup, that's what it has on that picture that is taken from this particular chapter, where this guy Samson, he goes down to one of the Philistine villages and towns, and he tells them a riddle which he figures they're never going to be able to work out, and he kind of falls in with this girl who eventually gets out of him what the answer to the riddle is. She tells her people, and he's mad about it all. So I thought we would start today with a puzzle for you, because Samson was right into puzzles, and we'll put that up on the screen for you. Here's today's puzzle for you. Once we get the second part of the answer for his one is, you'll appreciate that it's the answer is the honey, and the lion is the strong beast, and that's his answer. And it was all from an event where, on his way to this Philistine village, he'd met a lion, as you do, and as you do, he'd kind of tackled the lion single-handed and killed the lion, and when he'd come back, he'd found that there was a swarm of bees had made their home there and were creating honey out of the lion's belly type of thing. So that was the answer to the riddle. He figured they would never get it, but he spilled the beans to this girl. The girl spilled the beans to her townspeople, and he, as I say, was mad. We're going to start at the beginning of the story, though, and bring up this puzzle for you now on the screen. Okay. Have a look at that. I'm not going to read it out because you need to look at it yourself. There's the little puzzle. And I'm not going to spend too long on what the puzzle is, and you can kind of figure it out for yourself. But number one problem is you realize the first word is wrong. It should read there rather than they. It kind of sounds a little bit the same, but just the wrong word has been used. That's the first error there. And of course, the second error is the word error, because that's not how you spell error. It's a spelling mistake. Quite an easy mistake to make, error, depending who you are, where you're from. But of course, it's error rather than area. And that's the second one. And the really clever ones among you will realize that actually it's not a question at all. It's a statement, not a question. And that also is just using the wrong word. You get the drift of it, but it's the wrong word that has been used. And you're puzzling to think to yourself, well, where's the fourth one? And that's the fourth error, that there are actually three errors. And so that's the fourth error, if you see what I mean like that. It's a kind of Christmas cracker puzzle type of thing that you'd spend your time trying to sort out like that. Samson was that sort of guy. And I thought we would start with that because that's really very much to do with the story in the Bible here that we're going to read. But we're not going to get that far, I think, in the story today. I'm going to read from the book of Judges chapter 14 and the first 4 verses. There's the first verse and the second verse. And there are 3 errors in those 2 verses. We'll read them first of all, and then let me tell you what the errors are. Samson went down to Timnah, that's a town in the land of the Philistines. He went down to Timnah and saw there a young Philistine woman. When he returned, he said to his father and mother, I have seen a Philistine woman in Timnah, now get her for me as my wife. So straight off with Samson, this guy who is going to be the hero, the one through whom the Lord begins to do things in the land of Israel and the land of the Philistines as well. Straight off, 3 errors. And you can have a look at that and see what the errors are. It's not errors in the Bible, it's errors in Samson. Number one is simply this, that he kind of saw a girl and immediately he's saying, get her for as my wife. Love at first sight may be the sort of thing that you read in Mills and Boons, and you may think, yeah, love at first sight, I saw and that was it, I was away. Bad move. If you are thinking of getting married to the first person that you see that you think, wow, yeah, don't do it. It didn't work like that. And almost invariably, love at first sight is probably much more like lust. And certainly in the case of Samson, he just kind of fancied the girl. And that's not really the basis in which to get married. So that was number one error. That was one of the problems that he had, that he just kind of looked at a girl and thought, hey, yeah, I kind of like that girl, and therefore wanted to get married to her. So error number one, don't operate on that basis. Love at first sight. You really need a little bit more time to get to know one another before you start pitching into getting married. Error number two, I hope you're kind of looking at that and thinking to yourself, yeah, I can kind of figure out what the errors are. Error number two is this. It was a Philistine woman that he saw, a Philistine girl that he saw. And for an Israelite, which is what Samson was, and he'd already been earmarked in the way that he was being brought up by his parents, to be someone who would be dedicated to the Lord, and someone like that, Philistines were kind of no-go area. You weren't even going to countenance getting married to one of them. You weren't allowed to. You weren't meant to. It wasn't going to do you any good. It wasn't going to do them any good. It wasn't going to do anyone any good at all. And you were to just not get married to them at all. And so that's his second error. He's kind of clueless when it comes to what the Lord has said in the Bible, and is just kind of do his own thing. That's error number two. Hands up, you've kind of got a third error. Here's the third error coming up, and it's very simple. You don't speak to your mum and dad like Samson speaks to his mum and dad. Samson makes Kevin, Harry Enfield's Kevin? Remember Harry Enfield's Kevin? Hands up, you remember Harry Kevin? Yep, you do, okay. Samson makes Kevin seem like an angel. And this is the pattern of his living. He just sees a girl down in the Philistine land, and he goes and says to his dad and mom, get her for me. You do this for me, a spoilt brat in some ways. That's his whole approach to life. And this is the guy that is supposedly going to be the kind of hero of the story. Here's a man who is clearly, even just a kind of two brief verses there, you've already got three errors in the guy piled up. He is a flawed individual. The next verse explains how his mom and dad try to respond to him. We'll put that up on the screen for you there as well. His father and mother replied, isn't there an acceptable woman among your relatives or among all our people? Must you go to the uncircumcised Philistines to get a wife? But Samson said to his father, get her for me. She's the right one for me. And they are trying to persuade him that, hey, maybe you just need to take a little bit more time about this. Love at first sight is not really the way to go. They're trying to say, are you sure this is the right girl for you? Maybe you should spend a little bit more time like that. And really, she is an uncircumcised Philistine. It's not really your type, not really the sort of person that the Lord means you to be marrying. It's there in the good book that that's not what you're meant to do type of thing. And so they're kind of pushing those two lines again, the red and the blue there. The red, that love at first sight is probably just lust on your part, Samson. I don't want to use that word to you, but that's probably what it is, son. And Philistine women, you shouldn't really be going there at all. But he simply retains that same line and says, hey, get her for me. And it is just plain rude. It is plain downright stubborn on his part, and just not the way that you conduct yourself. And that's the guy. And we'd be inclined to think, listen, this is no guy for the Lord to be using. And it's quite striking, therefore, for us to read the next verse, verse 4, where we find that actually the Lord was doing something pretty strange through that. His parents did not know that this was from the Lord, who was seeking an occasion to confront the Philistines, for at that time they were ruling over all Israel. And what is then going to happen in the rest of the story, you're going to have to come back next week and find out how it kind of develops the story. But basically what the Lord was doing was he was prepared to use a man like this who is really desperately flawed in all sorts of ways. You would not be putting Samson up for sainthood. You know, there is no Saint Samson. He just doesn't qualify. He's plainly flawed in all sorts of ways. And yet the Lord is able to use a bungling guy like this who is I mean, he makes a bull in a china shop seem, really polite and, very delicate. But Samson is just a kind of nutcase in some ways. A big bungling guy who just is after his own satisfaction and so on. And yet the Lord is able to use a guy like that to begin to kind of agitate the Philistines and get them moving around, get them on their edge and so on. God is doing something. And the striking thing is that he's able to use a guy like that. God doesn't condone that. It's not like God says, well, we're not going to worry about the way you conduct yourself. But nonetheless, God is able to use flawed individuals. And that really is what I want you to get a hold of today. Because often we think about ourselves. We see just how flawed we are, that we can be a little bit like Samson in terms of, I want this and I need that, I'm going to have it, and so on, just pushing for our own line, our own end, and so on. And flawed in all sorts of ways. And we can kind of wake up some mornings and think, the Lord could never use a guy like me. No, I'm not fit for the service of God. And here's the wonderful truth. God uses flawed people to fulfill his purpose. So the one thing that you're never able to say is, I am disqualified from the service of the Lord because I am flawed. You just aren't able to say that in terms of all that God has made known to us in the Bible. He uses flawed people to further his purposes. And if you put your hand up and say, well, that's me, I'm a flawed person, then he says, that's great. I want to use you. I'm able to use you. I'm able to take the raw material that your life presents and use you in furthering my purposes. That's a measure of both the grace of God and the sovereignty of God. The way in which our God, in ways that really only he can understand, is able to turn all things, even our flawedness, able to turn all things for good and make them work together for our good, for his glory in our lives, and to use us, flawed as we may be, in his service. So let's take a moment just to offer ourselves, warts and all, as it were, before the Lord, and offer ourselves again to him and say, Lord, take me and use me. Father, thank you for the record. It's kind of horrifying in some ways to find this guy, Samson, upon whom your Holy Spirit has come, and yet himself such a wayward, such a stubborn, such an arrogant, such a self-indulgent and self-seeking guy, and to discover that nonetheless you're still able to use him. And that gives each of us real hope, because we know, living God, we too can be like that. But we want simply to offer ourselves, raw material that we are, flawed as we are, to say, Lord, it may not be much, but it's all that we are. We're yours. We want to give ourselves again to you and ask, please, that you would use us, come upon us by your Spirit and use us in your service, in all that the rest of the day holds, all the rest of the week holds, and indeed all that the rest of our lives will hold as well. Thank you for your Son Jesus, for all that you've given to us and accomplished for us in him. Help us then in serving you to do so in the confidence that you will take us and use us, and all for your glory, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Good. Well, enjoy the rest of your lunch and enjoy the rest of the chat. And lovely to have had you with us online as well. May you know the Lord's continued blessing too. God bless you.